Hi y'all, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be reviewing Mesopotamia and Egypt. The main idea behind these two civilizations is that historians use the term ancient Near East to refer to a number of civilizations that developed in Southwest Asia before 500 BCE. The Nile, due to its geographic location, also houses one of the world's oldest civilizations, ancient Egypt. So first we're going to start off with Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia literally translates to land between two rivers. And so here we see those two rivers, and this area right here is Mesopotamia. The two rivers were the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And since we see these two rivers here together in a otherwise mostly desert region of the world, this area is known as the Fertile Crescent because essentially these rivers created a plot of fertile land in what is a desert. So one of the major civilizations within Mesopotamia is the Sumerians. The Sumerians had a social hierarchy or a system of ranks that had a top class and worked its way down to the lowest class. The top class is the ruling family, officials and priests, so they're at the top of the social pyramid. Then you had merchants and artisans, then peasant farmers, and then at the bottom we have slaves. The Sumerians were also polytheistic, which means they worship many gods. And the reason why they did this is because back then they were unable to predict exactly what was going to happen with the weather or any natural disasters. And so they believed that there was a higher power that acted like humans that controlled these things. So they worshiped these gods in an attempt to take back control of these natural forces. They also built ziggurat, which is a pyramid temple, and they're always placed in the center of every city. As you see here, these little black dots on this fortress acted as windows, so this would be a protective system. And at the very top with the blue part of the building, that would be the temple, that'd be where they would pray. The Sumerians also developed cuneiform, which is the earliest known system of writing. And essentially there's wedge-shaped marks, and they put them on clay tablets, as you see here, using a reed pen. We also see the rise of Hammurabi. He was a king of Babylon. He developed the Code of Hammurabi, which is the first system of laws to govern his state. So by developing these laws, he helped unify the empire because everybody knew the laws, what they were supposed to do, how they were supposed to act. But it was unfair. So the way it was unfair is that this legal code was one of the strictest in the world. This is where we get the idea of an eye for an eye from, right here. And essentially, whatever you did to somebody would be done back to you. So for example, if you attack someone, you would be beaten. However, the basis of punishment also included where you stood in the social hierarchy. So the upper class did not receive the same punishments as the lower class. For example, if a slave stole a piece of bread, he could get his hand chopped off. Whereas if for some reason someone in the upper class did, they would just have to pay a fine. Looking at the other civilizations in Mesopotamia, first we have the Chaldeans. They revived the power of Babylon with Nebuchadnezzar. They built the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, so using geometry, they built these hanging gardens and encouraged practice in geometry and growing different plants. This is also considered one of the 7 wonders of the world, but it is not open for tourists today. We also have Phoenicia. They emerged as a trade center because if you look at the map, and we'll look at it a little bit later, Phoenicians were a little outside of those two rivers. They didn't have the same fertile land, and so they needed to trade to survive. And they're mostly known for creating the Phoenician alphabet. Next, we have the Persian Empire. And so you see here in the green, this is the Persian Empire. It takes over a large region of the Middle East. And they're unified under Darius. So he built roads, he made sure that the roads were repaired as well, developed a mail system, and set up a money economy. So this helped encourage trade because they would have these coin system where essentially these coins would mean something, and so they could trade with one another just using the system of money. We also see Zoroastrianism, which is the first monotheistic religion where Ahura Mazda, which was the good force, was in constant battle against Ahriman, which was the bad force. And so we see this practice in believing one God instead of multiple gods. We also see the rise of Judaism. Judaism is a monotheistic religion that recorded most of the events in the Torah, so essentially that is their holy book that they study. And so what we see is they were enslaved in Egypt, They had Moses come, the whole "let my people go," and they founded their own kingdom, which is called Israel, right here. And this is on the map. If you want to go look at the map right now, it is a little bit north of Egypt into the east. However, they fell to the Chaldeans and the Assyrians, who we just talked about, and that started the first Jewish diaspora, which again, as we talked about previously, diaspora is where you see a group of people scattering across the world, being forced out or fleeing violence. The Kingdom of Egypt. So now we're going to move south into Africa. And so the Nile River, right here, this blue little line right here, this is the most important physical feature of the Egyptian empire. People used the river to survive by building dikes, reservoirs, and irrigation ditches. And so what these would do is they would channel and store water for the dry season, so they'd always have a fresh supply of water. And using this river, we see King Menes uniting the upper and lower Egypt. So over here we have the upper Egypt, and lower is right here in the green. So yes, opposite of what you would actually think. But essentially these were two regions that, using the river, they're able to combine into one empire. So we have three main periods of ancient Egypt. The first, the Old Kingdom, which is 2700 to 2200 BCE. Pharaohs, so essentially kings, organized a strong state because Egyptians believed that the pharaoh was divine. So they believed the pharaoh was an extension or was a god himself. Power passed from one dynasty, which essentially means ruling family, to another. And people mostly know this period because of the development of pyramids, which is where pharaohs would be buried. After that, we see the Middle Kingdom, which is 2050 to 1800 BCE. Here we see pharaohs losing some of that power, and we see a political instability happening here. We see a new dynasty rise that focused on trade. They eventually, however, fell to the Hyksos. And last, we have the New Kingdom from 5050 to 712 BCE. We see an emphasis on building a powerful military because they previously had already fallen to another empire. They didn't want that to happen again. And so they also established a stronger military by creating buffer lands, so lands that would protect them from impending attacks. We see Queen Hatshepsut encouraging trade and Ramses II expanding empire, building monuments and shrines. So here is a picture of the queen. She was considered to be one of the first female rulers in her own name. Egyptian religion. So Egyptians practice polytheism, which is again practicing the belief of several different gods. They worship specifically Amon-Ra, which is the sun god, Anubis, which is the protector of the dead, Osiris, lord of the underworld, Isis, protector of women and children, and Horus, protector of Egypt. And so again, this idea of worshiping multiple gods in order to control what's happening around you. Egyptians built temples to honor these gods, and they practiced mummification to preserve the dead in the afterlife. So essentially mummification was wrapping people who were dead and placing them in these types of coffins, so when they came back, they could re-inhabit their bodies. Egyptian society. So we see Egyptians using hieroglyphics, which is a form of picture writing. Later on, they developed ideographics, and so this is a way to simplify because they had a lot of things to say. Hieroglyphics weren't always the most effective way, and so this essentially would be a picture to symbolize an idea or action. And then even later, they developed mnemonics, which is a simpler form of everyday writing. They wrote on papyrus, a paper-like material. And so we see Jean Champollion discovering the Rosetta Stone later on, and essentially what this did is it helped us decode ancient hieroglyphics so we could understand what the Egyptians were saying. So this is a picture of the Rosetta Stone here. Egyptian society with medicine and science. And so we see advances in the medicine and science. And so essentially physicians were skilled at observing symptoms, diagnosis, finding cures, surgery, and medicine. So they're practicing some forms of modern medicine that we see today. Priests and astronomers observed the skies, and when they did that, they studied the planets and mapped out constellations. Using their studies, they were able to create a calendar. They also used geometry to survey land, build temples, pyramids, and irrigation ditches. So as always, feel free to go back through and fill in any notes missed. Be sure to complete the other two videos that follow after this.